we get to start a new parak today. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. In the schus of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Today we start Daf Chavtes, Amud Aleph. Amen. The new parak, Elon Naris. Okay, we're going to talk about the knas, the payment that goes to a girl that was either seduced or raped. Now, the explanation here is that the father could have married her off because she's a young girl. And when he marries her off, he gets a certain amount of money for the kedushin. Now, this girl was violated by some other person without the father's consent. So there's two verses. There's the psukim in Shemais and there's the psukim in Dvarim, as we'll see on the next page. But one is the Einis and one is the Mafata. And the Ma'anis is the rape, and the Mafata is the seduced. By the Ma'anis, it says clearly that you have to give 50 coins. And by the Mafata, it just says Kesef Yishkal, that pays money. Kamayar HaBesulis, the money of the value of a Besula, which we end up learning that that's 50 shkalim. There's another rule that he has to marry her. Now, what happens if he does marry her? So if he was Mafata, if he just seduced her, she's a young girl, she's 12 years old. If he seduced her, so then he doesn't have to pay the coins to the father. That he doesn't have to pay it's called the knas, the fine. But if he's ma'aneser, then if he was ma'aneser, then even if he decides to marry her, even if he will marry her, he still has to pay that money. Okay, that's a difference over there. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah. It says, Elu Nairis, these are the girls, the young girls, Sheyesh lem knas, that they get a knas. They get this money if they were seduced or raped. Habala mamzeres. She lives with if the girl is a mamzeres. She's a offspring of a relationship that was prohibited, and she became a mamzeres. And she was born as a mamzeres. Vala nesina, or what is a nesina? These are the people, the Givainim, that they convinced Yeshua to convert them, making believe that they came from a different nation, that they weren't from Canaan. And then Yeshua converted them, and when they found out, he made them as water carriers and wood choppers. Now, David made a prohibition on them that they're not allowed to get married into the congregation. According to Rashi, it looks like it's an Issa Derabanan. That's the way Rashi puts it. David Gozer Aleim, Rashi says. Tosfos argues. He says that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with Issa Deraisa. Valakutis. Kuti is this nation that was in the north, in the Shomron, and they were placed there so that the wild animals don't come in. But when they started to get eaten by lions, so then they said that they need to be Jewish to live in the land of Israel. So they brought them scholars to teach them, and they converted. And there was a machlekes then if they're converted for real or if they converted just because of the lions, if it was a sincere conversion or not. So we're speaking now, Rashi says we're following the opinion that it was not a good conversion, and therefore they're not Jewish. And there's the Isser of there's the latest Chatenbam, you're not allowed to marry them. Tosfos asks on Rashi, they're not Jewish. Why do you have to pay them coins if they were? I mean, there's a halacha over here, but that halacha would only apply to a Jewish girl. The next category are people that possibly there was an assumption that they weren't a virgin anyway, that they weren't a basula, because they came from, they were non-Jewish before and they're converting, or they were taken captive, or they were maidservants that were redeemed. The only thing is that all of this took place before they were 3 years old. So even if there was an assumption that they had relations before that, but it would have grown back the basulim. So the fine, which is because this man is making her not a basula anymore, that would still be applicable. Yeah. Now, what we just said here is that a bunch of women that there is a knas on them, but we didn't say the most obvious, that a regular woman that doesn't have any of the prohibitions. As we asked, we said, these are the women that have knas. And we said this problem, this mamzeres and the sina and this. We left out and the regular Jewish girl also, but we didn't even bother saying that. The Gemara is going to touch on that. Habal achesei, how things are getting worse. If someone lives with his sister, the first list it's called chayve lavin. There's a negative prohibition in the Torah, thou shalt not, that says you're not allowed to marry those girls. And this person didn't actually marry them. He just he either raped or seduced one of them. So, and what the chiddush over here would be, why we mentioning this, is that even though he can't fulfill the end of the verse that says v'loisi alisha, that he should marry her, nevertheless he still has the first part, which is that he has to pay the knas. That's the idea of all of these prohibitions. Okay, so now when it gets worse, this is called chaybe krisis. Habal achesei, someone that lives with his sister, who was a basula beforehand. Bal achesaviv, or his aunt, that's his father's sister. Bal achesimai, or his other aunt, his mother's sister. All of these, she had to be a basula for there to be this fine. Bal achesishtei, and his wife's sister. Yeah. She would, if she was a basula and she was 12 years old, and he seduced her or raped her, he would have to pay the fine. Val Eishes Achiv, and on his brother's wife. Now, his brother's wife, she's probably not a basula, unless we say that she was, unless it's before the chuppah, it's after the kedushin, before the chuppah. And Rashi points out that we're not talking about that she's a married woman. We're talking, because then that would be an iser misa, chiyav misa. We're talking about an iser kares. So the prohibition would only be an kares if she was divorced. So it was his brother's wife, but he never consummated the marriage. Yes, there's a lot of factors here to make this possible. Val Eishes Achei Aviv. And the same thing would apply to the wife of his father's brother, which is also his aunt, right? His father's brother's wife. That she was married, betrothed rather, and then divorced, and she's still a basula, and this fellow lives with her. She had to be only 12 years old. Yeah, whatever the case was. Valanida. And if the woman is a nida, same thing also is a karis. And nevertheless, with all of these cases, yesh lehem knas, afal pi shein bekaris. There is a knas, even though there's karis, and the reason is afal pi shein bekaris ein ben misas bezdin. Okay, now the point of that, what the Gemara means to tell us, Mishnah means to tell us, is that I have a rule of kamlei b'derabimine, that whenever there's two punishments coming on a person, he only gets the one that's more severe. He doesn't get the one, it sort of like gets absorbed. The lesser punishment gets absorbed. So a lot of times if there's a payment and there's a chiyav misa, so he doesn't have to do the payment, right? He just has the one big punishment and he gets absolved from the lesser punishment. So over here also, there's the Isser Kares. He wasn't allowed to live with this woman. And there's also the Knas. We should say that he doesn't have to pay the fine. The Knas is the fine. He shouldn't have to pay the fine because he has the bigger punishment. Kamlei b'derabmine. He only gets the bigger one. So the Mishnah tells us that that's only when both punishments are coming from Bezdin. But this punishment, the Kares, is coming from heaven. And the Bezdin is applying the monetary fine. So he still has to pay that. Okay. That's the Mishnah. Hani naris, the Gemara says, Hani naris psulas islu knas ksheris loy. Only tell me that the girls that are puzzle, they're the only ones that have a knas, that you have to pay the father of the girl. You have to pay him this fine. But if it would be a regular kosher girl, then you don't have to. The Gemara says hachi kamer. Elu naris psulas sheyesh lahem knas. The psulis that do have a knas are the following. Yeah, who's it coming to exclude? I'm not really sure. I'll have to see through the Gemara who would not have a knas. Well, actually, what we'll see is that there's going to be a machlekes. At least today, we'll see that there's a machlekes, and not everyone holds of our mission. We'll see. Okay. Now the Gemara says that Elu Nairis Yeshlem Knas, the Mishnah said. So the Nairis have Knas. Naris in Ktanaloi. A Nara is a girl that's 12 years old. Rashi on the top says she's reached puberty. She has two pubic hairs until she's 12 and a half. There's 6 months in between Naris Labagris. Ktana. It means under 12 or over 12 and a half. Doesn't have a knas if someone rapes her or seduces her. Says it sounds like nara in ktanalai, that not a young child. Mantana, who's the one that holds this? Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav that this is the opinion of Reb Meir. This is Reb Meir's opinion. The Tanya, start in a brisa. A ktana, a young girl that's from 1 day old until she's 12, till she has two hairs, two pubic hairs. Yesh la mecher, vein la knas. The father can sell her as a slave, as a maidservant, as it's called, Amma Hevriya, a Jewish maidservant. And there's all those halachas over there, how that works. However, ein la knas, she doesn't have a knas. Now, Reb Meir's not saying, this is not a logical rule. This is based on the limit from Psukim that we're going to have later. And once she reaches the age of 12, until she's 12 and a half, which is 6 months later, yesh la knas vein la mecher. Then she has a knas, but she can't be sold as a maidservant anymore. Divri Reb Meir. That's what Reb Meir says. Now Rashi quotes, why can't she be sold after she's 12? The answer is, Rashi quotes the Gemara in Erechin. He says that there's a kal v'chaimer. If she was sold already when she was a ketana, and she becomes 12 years old, she goes free. So for sure you can't sell her lechatchila after 12. It's a kal v'chaimer. Okay, so that's Reb Meir's view. The chiddush of Reb Meir is not that she can't be sold after 12. The chiddush of Reb Meir is that she doesn't get a knas under 12. Reb Meir sums up his opinion that they're mutually exclusive. If she's at the age where there is a knas, then she's at the age that she can't be sold. And if she can be sold, which means she's under 12, then she doesn't get a knas. The Chachamim say no. She does get a knas when she's under 12, starting from age 3. Less than that, it's not considered relations. And the Basulim come back. But so there's a machlekes over here between 3 and 12, between the Chachamim and Reb Meir, and our Mishnah would be following Reb Meir, because our Mishnah only says Elu Naris. Gemara says Knas in Mecher Loi. You can only get the Knas under 12, according to the Chachamim. It can't be sold. Ema af Knas b'makom Mecher. Come hold that there's also Knas. Okay. On top of Chav Testament base. Now the Gemara says Vahani b'nei knasaninu. And these girls that we just spoke about in the Mishnah, we said that the Mamzeres and the Nesina and the Kutis and then all the close relatives, they actually get a knas. V'amai, why do they get a knas? Ikari kan v'leisi eli isha ruyalai. It says that one of the rules of a a woman that's raped or a girl that's raped or seduced is that the rapist and the seducer has to marry her. She is able to say she doesn't want, but he has an obligation that if she does want, that he has to support her, marry her, and support her for the rest of her life. So these girls were not eligible for marriage to a mamzeres or a nesina or a kutis. So half the halachas of the oinus and mefata don't apply. So why do we have the other half? Why do we have the knas part? Reish Lakish says we're going to learn from Sukkim. We're going to have two sources over here. We have one from Reish Lakish and then one from Rav Papa. Reish Lakish says, it says 3 times in the pasuk Nara. It goes like this: Nara, Nara, Ha-Nara. The truth is, it really only says it twice. But by the Oines, this is in Dvarim Chaf Beis. Both of these sources are chapter 22. It's either Dvarim 22 or Shmais 22. Dvarim 22 is the Ma'anis, and Shmais 22 is the Mefata. So over there by the Ma'anis and Dvarim, it says that if a man finds a Nara Basula, a girl that's a virgin, and he lives with her, and then afterwards the pasuk says that he has to give to the father of the Nara. So we learn that it says Nara, and it also says it has an extra hey, Hanara, Lavi Hanara. Now it didn't have to say any of them. It could have just said V'nasan le'aviha, to her father. La'aviha, that would have meant to her father. It doesn't have to then repeat the whole thing. It could have used the pronoun her father. So that tells me that it's an extra word. The Nara is extra and the hey is extra. Okay, so if that's the case, so Reish Lakish says like this: Chad legufei. Well, it had to say Nara once because we have to know what we're talking about. But v'chad, one of the times that it says Nara, it says Lasuye Chai B'Lav, and it's coming to include also someone that maybe I wouldn't have thought would be obligated, and that would be Chai B'Lav, people that are prohibited to marry because of a negative prohibition. For example, Mamzeres or a Nesina. According to Tosfos, that it's a dealing with a deraisa, not like Rashi. Rashi said it's a derabana. There's a problem. Tosfos has a very strong question on Rashi. Rashi said that the Nesina is only usher because David Gazar. Tosfos says in this big Tosfos on the top, it says V'nir l'Rabbeinu Tam the Nesina Surah Deraisa Mishum Leitis Chaten. David was Gazar that they should have to do this work, but they were usher because of Leitis Chaten. They were from the 7 nations. They weren't allowed to come into the Jewish people. Question on Rashi. The Mefarshim want to say, they want to answer Rashi like the Ran learns, that the first generation was not allowed to had a Isser of Leitis Chaten, but their descendants didn't have an Isser of Leitis Chaten, and then Rashi would hold that the later ones are their Rabbanan. That's what Rashi was quoting, that it was David Gazar. That's the way of answering Rashi. Whatever the case is, back to us, we have Chayve Lavin, which are being included because of an extra pasuk of an extra word of Nara. And then one more is Chayve V'chad Lasi Chayve Krisis. Another one is coming to include Chayve Krisis. Excuse me. Chayve Krisis, which that would be the second half of the Mishnah, which was Achaisai and Achaisaviv. He lives with his sister, his aunt. All of those are much stricter prohibition. But nevertheless, those will still have the rule that he has to pay the 50 coins if he seduces her or rapes her. Okay. Rav Papa says, Besula ha besulais. he takes the pasuk in Shmos Chaf Beis. Over there by the Mafate, it says, "Ki yifatish besula," if a man will seduce a girl, a virgin girl, and afterwards it says that he has to pay kesef yishkal. Sounds like he has to weigh out the silver, k'mayar habasulis, like the payment of the virgin. And we're going to learn back and forth that how much is that? Yeah. Right. There's some assumptions there, but that was Alma. Yeah, that's a different. It's a different word. Yeah. It depends how you translate it. We don't have any source that it has to mean that. I mean, it could mean what you want it to mean. It's another language, So, yeah.
Very fixed amounts
Of 50 coins. Yeah. Right. It's Exeris Akasav. And it's actually Exeris Shava that we learn one from the other, the Ma'inus from the Mafata, and together we come out with 50 coins. Okay. So Rav Papa learns from Basula Basulis. It says that he has to pay the value of the Basula. Now it didn't have to say it. It could have just said, Kamayar Basulis. And it could have been Kamayar. Didn't have to read Basulis at all. Just could have said Kamayar. Okay. Like her value, right? So Chad Gufay, one is the same way Rish Lakish said. One of them, it had to say it once. Chad and one is to include the negative prohibition, women that you're not allowed to marry because of negative prohibition, which is like the mamzeres, like we said. And V'chad Lasiyich Chayvi Krisis, and one is coming to include the Chayvi Krisis. Chayvi Krisis was a prohibition that would incur the karas punishment, which would be a close relative, like the sister or the aunt. The Gemara asks straight away, Rav Papa, my time Rish Lakish. Why didn't Rav Papa use the psukim that Rish Lakish used? Rish Lakish is earlier, but which was said by Oinus, by the Ma'anas, by the rapist. It says, Hahumi by Leila Kadabaya. Because Rav Papa says that I need the word Nara that it says by the rapist. Over there, I need that word because of something that Abaya says. Damar Abaya Ba'alel Mesa Pater. Shnemar V'Nasan Laviyanara of Leila Avi Mesa. The girl passed away. Not because he killed her. She passed away. Before they were able to bring the guy to court and pass judgment on him. So then he doesn't have to pay the 50 coins. Yeah. Doesn't sound great. It sounds like there was some foul play. She just dies. But whatever the case is, you think so?
They do not.
No, this is not the guy that's dying. This is the girl that's dying. She's just a victim. So Abaya says that Abaya happens to be Rav Papa's teacher. So Rav Papa doesn't learn like Rish Lakish because he wants to take the statement of Abaya, which is his teacher, and to say that a special rule that he has to give to the father of the Nara. That means only while she's alive. Not to the father of the deceased. That's when you have to pay. If she passed away, then he doesn't have to pay it. No. Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, exactly the same. Under 12. Yeah. Right. Right. You actually have to ask the father.
Less than 12, but over 12, they said.
Yeah.
Not considered rape.
Yeah.
No.
Well, actually, over 12 and a half. Yeah.
No life.
Right. As it was in Iran and all those countries, even like 50 years ago. Could be still is, I don't know. But yeah, people told me the grandmother got married at 13 or something. They lived in the in-laws' house until he learned he would the husband would apprentice during that time while they lived. He would live 5 years in the in-laws' house. And then he would, at 18, they would move out, and he already had a trade. And okay, so whatever the case is, there's a discussion over here. Why is he exempt? I mean, we learn it from a pasuk, but there is another halacha that this could be compared to. That let's say the girl is now over 12 and a half before they end up coming to court. So she becomes it's called a baigeres. So the rule is that he doesn't have to pay her there also either. The question is if we can compare these two laws, halavia nara, but not to the baigeres, because she just became a baigeres right before they ended up in court. So the law would switch then. He doesn't have to pay her, and also when she passed away, he doesn't have to pay her. Yeah.
Doesn't it go when he did the Avera?
Yeah. Apparently, it has to do with also when they end up in court, because, yeah. What was the reason over there? Leila be baigeres.
You could have damn it, you know.
The problem over there was that the father, who are you going to pay it to? You're supposed to pay to the father, but the girl is not under the father's jurisdiction anymore. She's not Birshus Aviyah. So maybe we could learn also that when she passes away, she's also not Birshus Aviyah. You know, who are you going to pay to? So there's a Reb Chaim on the Rambam that learns that this is totally different. That V'leila Mesa is not because she's not Birshus Aviyah. It's a special Gzer Sakasav, and that's a special din. I don't know how he gets to it, but that's the okay. That was why Rav Papa doesn't learn like Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish, my time in Layamakar Rav Papa. Why doesn't Rish Lakish learn like Rav Papa? I mean, Rav Papa wasn't around in Rish Lakish's days, but why doesn't he take that svara of the limud from the pasuk in Shmais Chaf Beis of Besula Besulais? It says, "How many baile gzeira shava?" He actually uses that for something else. There's a gzeira shava, verbal analogy. It says in this place one thing. It says in this place another thing, and it says the same thing in another place. And so we combine the two together. It goes like this. Titania says in the Braisa, Kesev Yishkol Kamayar Abesulais, that he weighs out the silver, the value, the payment of the Besula. Sheyehezek Kamayar Abesulis. This is by the Mafata, by the when the man that seduced the 12-year-old girl, that he has to give the payment of the Besulis. Umayar Besulis Kazeh, and the payment of the Besulis is like this. Now, how much is the payment of a Besula? Well, that we have to learn from Dvarim Chaf Beis, where over there it says that the payment is 50 kesef, shleishim, chamishim kesef, 50 coins, 50 silver. And over here it says yishkal. So we learn out that it's 50 shkalim. Okay. Rish Lakish nami mi bay leila kadabaya. You know, what we just did over here was we said that we're looking for sources that women that it's prohibited to marry still have the rule of kanas. They still get the payment. So we brought a source from Ma'anas, that was Rish Lakish, the rape. We brought a source from Mefata, that was Rav Papa, from the seduced. Why didn't each one hold the other one? Because there are special halachas that this one wanted to learn that halacha from the other one's case, and this one wanted to learn that halacha from the other one's case, the psukim. Problem is that they all hold of the same halachas, so it creates a question on each of them because they're not arguing about this. Rish Lakish also holds that if the girl passed away, that he doesn't have to pay. How does he use those psukim? Rav Papa wasn't able to. Rav Papa namin by Leilig Shavar. Rav Papa also holds that it's 50 coins. How does he use those psukim? Rish Lakish wasn't able to. Ella, we're going to have to go like this. Shita Kroi Ksivi has 6 verses. Wait on to just to simplify what just happened here. So we had 3 verses by each one, by 3 extra words. One of them we considered not extra, and then we have 2 that are extra. And from those 2 extra, one of them would teach me Chai V'Lav, and one of them would teach me Chai V'Krisis. We came along and we asked the question that one of them is necessary. Not both of them. One of them was necessary. Okay, so now we said, how can you learn 2 halachas when you only have 1 remaining? Okay, so now the way we're going to resolve this is like this. We join all of them together. Join all of them together, we're going to have 2 remaining, and that's how we're going to learn it. Okay, so it says 6 times. Naira, Naira, Nahanaira, Basula, Basula, Habasulis. Well, Trela Gufayu. 2 of them it needed to say because it needed to in the context, it needed to tell us what we're talking about. So it had to say once Naira, it had to say once Basula. Then if one of them would be used for Abaya's rule that said that you don't pay to the father of the deceased. And one of them is for the Gzer Shava that tells me how much money you pay, which is 50 shkalim. I salute Trey, I have left over 2 because I only used up 4 so far. One teaches me Chai V'Lavin, which is the Mamzer and the Sina and the Kutis, that over there you have to pay 50 coins, even though he wouldn't be able to marry her. And the other one is to tell me Chai V'Krisis if he rapes or seduces his sister, or aunt, or etc. Oh, because if I use the verses of Nara, so I only have 1 remaining, because one of them I needed to teach me that only to the father of the live girl, but not to the father of the deceased. Now I have 1 remaining. So what am I going to learn from that? So what I do is and then the same is with the basula. If I use the word basula, so now when I join them together, now I have 2 left over. So those 2 left over can teach me Chai V'Lavin and Chai V'Krisis. Still have a knas. Chai V'Lavin means that this woman wouldn't be allowed to be married because of a negative prohibition, and Chai V'Krisis is Chai means the obligation of kares is this woman wouldn't be allowed to be married because the punishment for marrying her would be excision. So those are 2 categories of prohibited marriages.
But the issue is that we have to separate Chai V'Lav and Chai V'Krisis.
Yeah. You're getting into this. The Taisvus V'Chad Asiyah Chai V'Lavin is going to tell us that maybe we actually are putting them together and we're using one for Chai V'Aseh. It's a whole discussion. The kares is excision. Chai V'Lavin just means negative prohibition. Those are 2 categories that would get malchus or something. Lashes. Gemara now says, what we just did in the Mishnah, we're actually arguing with. Our Mishnah does not agree with the following Tanoim. The Tanya was taught in a Brisa. It says, V'loi si Elisha. And this girl needs to stay with him as a wife. Well, he has to keep her as a wife. She can reject him. And now, Shimon Atimani Yomer, Isha Shiesh Bahavaya. That would only apply to a woman that you can get married to. Now, you have to recognize over here, there's 2 ways, there's 2 possibilities. If someone gives a ring to a sister and says, Hariyat Mekudeshesem, so there's no marriage there, they don't need a divorce. Someone gives a ring to a mamzeres, right? Mamzeres, and says, Hariyat Mekudeshesli, they're going to need a get. That was a prohibited action. And if the marriage took place, they're not allowed to stay together. Right? So one is there was no marriage, and one is there was a marriage. It's just prohibited. So what Shimon Atimani is saying is it has to be the only time that they'll be obligated to pay the knas is if the marriage was able to take place. But if it was to his sister or his aunt, where over there it's chayve krisis, there is no marriage at all. So then he doesn't have to give the knas, which means that Shimon Atimani is agreeing to half of our Mishnah. The first half, that if he raped a mamzeres or nesina, there still is a knas, because there is havaya. Havaya means that there is there is the marriage actually worked. Okay. Reb Shimon ben Menashe Aimer, he's I don't know if to call it strict or lenient. He says Isha Riya Lekaima. It has to be a woman that you're able to stay married to. That excludes everything of our Mishnah, right? Not just that the marriage worked, but you have to be able to stay, and therefore you can't stay married to the mamzeres, the nesina, or the kuti. So therefore, there's no knas. So our Mishnah is arguing on both Reb Shimon Atimani and Reb Shimon ben Menashe. My binaya, what's the difference between them? I explained it already. But Amar Reb Zeir mamzeres and nesina could be naya. According to Shimon Atimani, that says that there has to be able for the marriage to take effect. There is a marriage, they're not allowed to, but it's considered a marriage. But according to Reb Shimon ben Menashe, that says that they have to be able to stay married, he has to be able to keep her. So he's not allowed to stay with her. So then it would be exempt from the knas. Yeah. No. No. It has to be a basula. What just happened here? Let me backtrack. There's a rule that the seducer and the rapist have to marry the girl that they violated. Now the problem is that the Mishnah gave us cases of girls that they're not allowed to marry. Now, there's two categories of those cases. One is where even if they do marry, there's no marriage. And one is if they marry, it is a marriage. It's just that they're not allowed to. It's prohibited. Our Mishnah says that they're obligated to give the fine for all of them. Even though it's an impossible marriage. It will never. Okay. Now, Shimon Atimani says that they have to give the fine only if the marriage is possible, even if it's prohibited. And Shimon ben Menashe says that even then there's no fine. So we have basically three views. Now, Rabbi Akiva comes along, or Rabbi Akiva Damer in Kedushin. Yeah. According to Shimon Atimani. But according to our Mishnah, you still have to give the fine. Rabbi Kiva Damer in Kedushin Teifsim B'chayvi Lavin my binayu. Rabbi Kiva has a view. This is throwing us back in Yavamas. Rabbi Kiva's view was that any prohibited marriage creates a mamzer. Our understanding right now in this Gemara is that if chayve lavin, the offspring of a chayve lavin is a mamzer, then that probably means that there's no marriage there either. Usually, the cases of mamzerus were cases where someone marries his sister, or incest. Those things were, or a married woman already, that adultery, that would create a mamzer. Now over there, those cases, there's no marriage. He doesn't even need a get in those cases, right? There's no marriage. So now, the cases that create a mamzer are cases where there is no marriage at all. It's impossible for that to be a marriage. Now, Rabbi Akiva says that any prohibited relation, even negative prohibited marriages, also create a mamzer. That would mean that those aren't marriages either. So we're asking like this: according to Rabbi Akiva, for some reason, the Gemara wants that machlekes Shimon Atimani and Reb Shimon ben Menashe to fit also with Rabbi Akiva. Problem is, according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no difference between them because there's no marriage by any of them. Where it says it could be nayo almana l'kain gadol. We found one exception. A widow that marries a Kohen Gadol. Now, a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. Well, there's another rule. Kohen Gadol has to marry a basula, a virgin. It's going to be strange that she's going to be a virgin and she's a widow, but it's possible because she was a widow from the betrothal. Now, we're talking about now that the Kohen Gadol. Oh, look at this case. I didn't even realize this. We're talking about that the Kohen Gadol is raping an almana, a widow. Yeah, times are right. So, this will make the news. So, so if that's the case, then is this a possible marriage? Is this a possible marriage? According to Rabbi Akiva. Akiva says if it would be chayvei lavin, you see, the rule is, no. Rabbi Akiva agrees in that case that even though there's a lav, even though there's a negative prohibition there, he agrees that it's still considered a marriage that would require a get. Okay. Yeah. Rabbi Simai, like Rabbi Simai says, the Tanya Rabbi Simai Yomer, Menakol Oiser Rabbi Akiva Mamzerim Chutz Me Almana L'Kohen Gadol. Everyone's going to come out of Mamzer, according to Rabbi Akiva, except for Almana that marries a Kohen Gadol, the offspring of that relations, of that union will not create a Mamzer. Because the pasuk says, it says you should not marry and you should not profane the kahuna, right? So that means that it only creates a chalal, a profaned offspring, but not a mamzer. We learned from Psukim, Rabbi Simai learns from Psukim that would be Rabbi Akiva's view, that the offspring of that union is not a mamzer. Rabbi Yeshevav Da'amar Bayu v'Natzeach al Akiva ben Yosef Shayaimer Kol Shem Leibia b'Yisrael Avlad Mamzer Mai B'Nayu. Rabbi Yeshevav, it's not so common, but Rabbi Yeshevav says, let us come and argue and be victorious over Rabbi Akiva, where Rabbi Akiva says that any prohibited relations creates a mamzer. When the way he says that is that it's including even almana l'kohen gadol. So my benaya, what are we going to have now? What's going to be the difference? Reb Shimon ben Manasseh, where it says it could be nayu. The difference would be chayve yaseh mitzvah daim. It says over there by a Mitzri, an Egyptian, or an Edomite, when they convert, it says the third generation can come into the congregation of Hashem. Now, because it says the third generation can come in, that tells me that the first two generations are not allowed to marry into the community. They have to marry another Mitzri or something, or another convert. So that would be it's called a positive prohibition because it's a negative prohibition that's derived from a positive. So we call it a positive prohibition. It's a isser aseh. It's a prohibition of a positive command. Now, Rabbi Akiva in those cases didn't say that they're going to have a create mamzerim, even though you're not allowed to marry them, but he didn't say that. So Hani Rabbi Yeshevav hilafuke mitayma the Rabbi Simai kasi shaper. If Rabbi Yeshevav is coming to tell us that if Rabbi Yeshevav is coming to tell us that he's talking specifically about what Rabbi Simai included. Rabbi Simai included into Rabbi Akiva's categories all chayve lavin, including the almana. If that's the case, then he's coming to tell us that chayve yaseh would not be mamzer, and that would be a distinction between Rab Shimon ben Manasseh and Shimon Atimani, where we are it's a marriage that you're not allowed to, which is a prohibited marriage, but it doesn't mean that it's not a marriage. And so therefore there would still be a knas by those women. However, we don't really know what Rabbi Yeshevav was saying. However, but if we just read Rabbi Yeshevav alone without comparing him to Rabbi Simai, then what does he say? Kol shein leibia b'Yisrael havlad mamzer. If you just read his words out of context, you read his words out of context, what he's going to be telling us is that any relations that's prohibited, the child is a mamzer, then afilu chayv yaseh. Then it would be even including chayv yaseh. If he's referencing Reb Simai and he's adding in even the almana l'kain gadol, then we can say, well, maybe he wasn't talking about chayv yaseh. But if you just read his words out of context, he wasn't referring to what Reb Simai said, then we don't even have anyone that's not going to be a mamzer according to Rabbi Yesheva. My benayu. Gemara says it could be benayu be'ula l'kain gadol. It's a different chayv yaseh. It says that a kain gadol has to marry a be'ula, has to marry a basula, a virgin. Now, here we have a very difficult scenario because, well, first of all, let's set this up. What's Rabbi Yesheva telling us? That if a kain gadol rapes a girl that's not a virgin, he's going to have to pay the knas. Now, even though the offspring, according to Rabbi Akiva, the offspring of every forbidden marriage creates a mamzer, so therefore there is no marriage here. So why should he have to pay that knas? The answer is that over here, Rabbi Akiva would agree that there is a marriage. Okay. And if he stays married to, it's going to be a problem. So umayshna, the question is, why over here is there an exception? So the Gemara says the havelei asay she'eino shava bakol, because it's not an equal asay for everyone. It's only for the rule of a kain gadol. Now, 1 second. Some problems over here. The biggest problem is that there's no knas if she's a beula. There's only a knas if she's a basula. So the whole case is, we missed the point. The point is that this person rapes a girl. Now she's not a basula. He has to pay the fine, that because he took away the virginity. So now he has to pay that value. But if she's a beula already, and that's why she's prohibited to the kain gadol, so why is there a fine? So Rashi over here says that we're talking about she was a beula shalei kedarka. She was a beula. She had relations in an abnormal manner, just like sodomy, and that makes her prohibited to the kain gadol, but she's still a virgin. So the laws of the basula regarding the fine are different than the laws of the basula regarding the kain gadol, and that's how this could work out. Okay, Simon the type. Have a good day, everyone.